when I received the invitation to talk about public space, I was trying to think what can be the best approach to start discussing this kind of projects, because we have seen the emergence of a lot of spontaneous and bottom-up projects in the past years. So maybe the best way is to take a little bit of distance again, and then try to refocus on these kind of projects. That's why I want to start with a small history about the island of Nauru. I don't know if you have heard about it. It's a small island in the middle of Australia and New Zealand. And it was very rich because it has a lot of natural resources of phosphates that were created by the dropping of seabirds. What happened with Nauru? At the first moment, they have, you can see here, these were the protected areas of the phosphate, and the government has a law to don't exploit it in a very aggressive way. But as we have seen in the history of capitalism, this is almost impossible to maintain like that. So at the end, big companies came to the island and start exploiting the mines. And now, only in 40 years, the island has no more resources. It's very interesting to think that in the early 80s, it was one of the richest places in the world with one of the most highest income per capita. And now we can only see a detention center and the airport to transport the immigrant people there. And this place that was one of the most natural and richest places in the world is like that right now. So then, if we travel to Detroit, that I will not extend because we all know what happened in Detroit, I just want to point the similarities and don't spend time showing ruined porn, pictures, etc., just to think that in Detroit happens the same. It was the big industry with a lot of money in there, and when the system started failing, the companies just take their industry out and leave the people unemployed. And even if one place it's pure industrial and the other one is a natural place, we can see the similarities that in a short period of time, they went from being one of the most richest places to be in bankruptcy. So this makes us think, why? Why is happening this? And why this is being repeated and repeated, and we keep doing the same mistakes? It's because capitalism and the financial system is always the same everywhere in the world. We can see capitalism in our transportation systems, in the stock markets, in the building industry. So it also has a lot to do with public space, because when cities are not working good anymore and don't supplying the citizens with the things they need, people feel the need to start reacting aside the system. In 2008, all of us have seen this kind of images everywhere in the world, because in Spain we have the theory that, or the feeling that it only happens there, but we have the economical crisis in the US, also in Greece, in Portugal. But we forgot with the impulse of the moment that this is not new. In 73, we have the big oil crisis everywhere, especially in North America, in United States and Canada. So it's time to rethink that these problems are cyclical, and because the system keeps growing for a period, then this kind of industry doesn't work anymore, then got bankruptcy, then start growing in another kind of industry, and we keep the circle. So if going back to Europe and to Spain, we can see nowadays this kind of landscapes. This picture is from Spain, from the series of a photographer and architect called Julia Schulz-Domburg. And this is the reality we are living nowadays there. We have these big skeletons everywhere, but at the same time, we have these scenes everywhere. People is being evicted every day for their homes because they don't have money to pay the mortgage. And at the same time, we are seeing the third reality that it's the banks and private companies taking advantage of that situation. I'm sorry that the slide is in Spanish, but what you have can read there, it's opportunities. Flats from evicted peoples are on sale. So this is, these three images are very controversial because we can see how the system keeps taking advantage of all this kind of situation and doesn't taking care of the people in our cities. So what happened? People need to react by themselves. When they feel like the system is not helping them, people start reacting. And we have seen in Spain these people fighting for the right of housing. In 2011, it was 2010, it was the first big manifestation in Central Europe, in Greece, this one. And then we start looking to different kind of protests everywhere. This was in Spain, and people was complaining about the corruption, about political issues, about the lack of public space. But we were able to see in Occupy Wall Street later, after the European manifestations and struggles, that it was the first moment that when the protests were focused in the fact of money, because with this experience in Greece, in Spain, in Portugal, etc., people have realized that the fact behind all these problems, it's money or the lack of money. So this makes us think that we should not be waiting for responses or for more crashes to happen. There are bad things happening, and not now. It's nothing new. So we need to be positive and start thinking how to react. Yet in the 80s, we have seen speeches like this.
From France to the Philippines, from Jamaica to Japan, from Malaysia to Mexico, from Sri Lanka to Singapore, privatization is on the move.
Something new had been born. Its name was popular capitalism.
Popular capitalism is nothing less than a crusade to enfranchise the many in the economic life of the nation. We conservatives are returning power to the people. That is the way to one nation, one people.
So I don't want you to think that I'm being very negative. I'm just trying to recover things from the past to see how we are reacting and how we can try to do new kind of project at this moment. Because capitalism is there, and this idea of one people, one nation, who is one people? The 1% that has always been there. So we need to be aware of all these concepts to know how to react. The Black Friday, known worldwide, started in the US, and it's the day you can buy everything you want at the minimum price, and people make long queues and fight on the internet. There has been in the past year even recorded 3 or 4 deaths by people fighting to get one thing that maybe they don't even need, but the system creates the needs. And we usually forgot that for having those queues, we also have these queues of people being exploited, working, I don't know, 16, 18 hours a day. So we need to be aware that how the system is taking advantage of our behavior, our daily behavior, and we don't even think about that. Even our utopias and dreams have been somehow conquered by capitalism. This is a project by White Think Tank in China, and they wanted to represent this idea by mixing up Constant New Babylon with the Southdale shopping mall in the US, just to transmit and make people aware of this idea that we should not let that capitalism conquer our dreams. Because in the past year, we have seen images like that everywhere that represents this fight, represents these dreams we have nowadays, but we doesn't what is behind that is this. So it's really provocative when you are able to realize that every time you're going to a protest to buy one of these, there is some people taking advantage of that, even from our protest. So maybe the response is here that we need to change the way we think that the meaning of welfare or the way we have been living. So going back to that, if we don't have money, maybe it's time to start thinking again. But thinking in a different way, because the responses we have seen are also driving us to see gadgets like this everywhere, or like this, or Bitcoin mining, drones on demand, so you can send anything you want, wherever you want, or 3D printed shelters on the moon. So when you try to take distance and realize, you see that when Cedric Price wrote this more than 50 years ago, it's the same question we need to ask ourselves right now. It's not an old question, it's the perfect moment to start rethinking again in that. Part of these questions and techno-fetishism we are supporting today with the increase of the networks has also a lot to do with money and with economy, because we have created all these new systems to exchange and to have fair rates. One example is the Bitcoins. I don't know who has a Bitcoin wallet here? Nobody? Okay, I have it, but to be sincere, I haven't used it. So we can see how these are very, very interesting experiments, because they are trying to work aside the system, but at the same time, human behavior is always the same, so they get absorbed by this behavior. When the first Bitcoins were created, the value was around $6 per Bitcoin. 2 weeks later, it was 70 euros. And just 3 months after that, they peak the value of 1,000 euros for every Bitcoin. So the concept of speculation was there also. You can go to Berlin and have some hamburgers with Bitcoins, but at the same time, you can see people in the US taking advantage of that and trying to introduce these new ways of dealing in the traditional system, accepting donations but Bitcoins. So it's like everything we try to create to avoid the system, at the end it has been absorbed by them. I just want to share a small anecdote. We are publishers, so we start thinking, okay, let's try to, if we are interested in researching topics about money, let's try to test it by ourselves. So we put all our ebooks on sale, allowing the pay of Bitcoins. Also because in our networks, you know, the way you communicate now with Twitter and Facebook, etc., you can see that the people that surrounds you or somehow is interested in your work also is researching the same kind of issues. So we decided to do that 3 months ago, and until now we haven't sold any book with Bitcoins. And of course, you can argue, okay, your books are not so good, so they are not selling. No, but in Amazon, they keep selling. So this is just a reflection, because we are always talking about new ways of exchanging, new markets. We are against capitalism, at least in this kind of circles of people working in public space, etc. But when we become face-to-face to the opportunity, we are maybe too lazy or we don't know how to start dealing with these new ways. And it's easier and faster to click the Amazon one click, and we forget about Bitcoins, even if then we are tweeting, okay, Bitcoins are the new. So it's just this contradiction that I want to take here on the discussion. Or platforms like Kickstarter. I really like Kickstarter because when it was created, it opened whole new ways to exchange and trade your creations. But at the same time, what happened? When something becomes a trend, you start using it for everything. So what I don't like is the kickstarting for everything model, because if we don't think about what you are producing and why you are producing it, and the distribution chains you have to support, so that there is nothing new. It's just a new way to collecting money, but it's not really new. It has existed always. By the way, people in my father's generations call it the 3F, friends, family, and full. So it's the same kind of model. So every time when we want to start or put something in a platform like that, we should think about the consequences. Because, for example, this is one of the most successful projects in Kickstarter. You can see they raise a lot of money, but what happened? They raised much more money than they were expecting, so the production and the delivery to the people who has backed the project was super delayed, and people start complaining, and now, a few years after that, it is working good, but at this moment, if you only think in the production and in collecting that money, and you don't think in all the layers behind that, it can be a failure too. Or for example, this project that just copying a model because it has been successful in one side, but not in the other. And people who worked with Bitcoins created this crowdfunding with Bitcoins. But they didn't realize that usually, it's a way of thinking and behaving. People who support new ways like Bitcoins, it's because they don't like this kind of traditional model. So you can see the failure here. Nobody has backed any project because if I use Bitcoins, it's not for this kind of models. So maybe the reflection is that we have new tools, a way of communicating with a lot of people with new ideas, but maybe we haven't made the shift in our minds to start thinking really in the 21st century model. We have the tools of the 21st century, but thinking as in the past, just trying to innovate, but in the background, the systems are the same. So maybe the shift is to start thinking in design and architecture as a critical tool right now. I think this is the need for the moment. The project I will show now is not new. It was from 2011, I think, but I explain it later. How the police look like ants walking there. Well, before explaining that, I know that maybe we are tired of seeing news about drones everywhere. Drones for delivering Amazon package, drones for surveillance, drones for whatever. But this project was super interesting because it was the first time that these guys in Poland start thinking to using a very well-known technology, but using it in another way, from the opposite side. So what I recall of this project of the drone, flying this manifestation, is the shift of the thinking, because it was, I think, a very good moment to take in account for us that maybe we don't need to invent new technologies for everything. Maybe some things are there, or we just need to improve something, but what we need to change is our way of thinking about that. That's why I want to also share this project. It's called Defense Distribute. It was created by Cody Wilson, and it's a 3D printed gun. Maybe you are thinking right now, what has this to do with public space? But I think there are a lot of concepts behind that at the end of the lecture we can link or relate. He started working on this 3D printed gun, but not only as an object for exhibition or design, but a real gun that he can shoot and that can work. And the first day he can shoot with the gun, he released a video and it was in the news. And a few weeks or months later, it was start being forbidden in different states in the United States, because the project is from the United States. So what can we learn from this project? The United States is a country that you are allowed by the constitutional right of having a gun. So if you are allowed of having a gun and you have the right of that, why can't you 3D print your gun? This makes us think again in the fact of economy, because who is having the revenues of selling all these guns? If we start 3D printing our guns, the big loss will be for these companies. So it doesn't have an ethical value, this prohibition in the US. It has an economical value, and the motivation is pure economically. You can see in the supermarkets this. So why I can 3D print my gun? It's just a call for start thinking on the hidden layers of every project. Because when we see the Cody Wilson, and I was seeing in the Wall Street Journal or the New Yorker, okay, it has been banned in different states, and people was, yes, because weapons are really bad, are for kill people, but they don't think that the weapons are still there. So just to think how economy affects all our daily life, even in a normal supermarket. So all these facts and motivations and people who really understand that problem start envisioning these new futures and these new ways of acting in our cities in a different form. Now we don't have the big companies selling weapons. We need to be small layers, collaborating, contributing, sharing information to make these projects really possible. One of the projects that Jan knows very well is Open Structures. I think this is a really interesting project because it's design, open source, but it also has a big creative mind behind, because every time you put up a new open source project, for example, you have several files of people doing stuff, but you cannot mix this stuff and these designs up because this material doesn't fit with this, or this size doesn't fit with this other. But by the simple fact of using a grid, you can make that the design you have done or you have uploaded can be mixed up with other designs. So you can have a bigger piece and try to make them all fit. This is just one example for you to see the grid. You can see here. And with these pieces, they have done toys like that, for example. Or growing and going beyond that, we can see all these pieces made by different people, but all of them respect the grids. So you can combine all the pieces and make larger structures, like this kitchen, for example. This has not been designed by one single person. This has pieces that has uploaded by different users of the web, but then when you start looking at all the files they have, you can start thinking about new combinations and develop new models. And then you can share your whole design again to show the people how you have used the files. So I think this project represents very, very well these new ways of contributing and collaborating, because you can take advantage of the creativity of others, but with a series of respectful norms, like the grid, and then you upload later also your design. You can share, other people can take advantage of your creativity, and the community is growing in a very interesting way. So going from one kitchen to the other, and going from design to public space. I really like this project because it's very simple but very thought-provoking at the same time. It has been created in the United States because, as this big empire, they feel they have the right to ban relationships or whatever they want when a country is against their political views. and they call cities in conflict, and they don't allow to have products produced there to be selling on US supermarkets or whatever kind of thing they want to do against these countries. So these people created the conflict kitchen to use food as a means of communicating people why these countries are really being banned and which is the real political conflict that is happening there, and not only to receive the inputs from the mass media, because we all know that mass media, more or less, is always somehow manipulated by political views. So they make like pop-up kitchens, and each kitchen is dedicated to one country, and at the same time that people is tasting the food only of that country, they receive the explanations. This is, for example, the Cuban one, and you can see that when people buy the Cuban food and they sit down in this public space, they can also be informed about the real conflict, the reality behind the revolution. That I don't know, I'm not supporting the whole thing behind the revolution, but I don't think it's only bad. It, as everything, it has good sides and bad sides. So here you can read the real history and try to have your own conclusions, not only reading in the newspapers, in the mass media, or in the TV, what they want us to listen. So I think it's a really interesting project because also takes place in the public space. You buy your food, and then you have the opportunity to share with all the people who is having this food, share these ideas or your doubts, if maybe you don't believe what you are reading here, so you can start a conversation, and it's a way also to catalyzing relationships in the public space. This project is more or less similar to the other one because, as you have seen, none of these two last projects are based on technology because, as I was saying before, maybe we don't need only to think. I do think that technology is there and we can use it, but maybe what we need as a first step is to know how to use it or what for. So this other project is similar to the conflict kitchen in the sense that it tries to give a solution to a conflictive issue. In New York, street vendors are forbidden to take the street. Also in Barcelona, we can see people showing the things they are selling in a big blankets like that, and when they see a police coming, they just grab at this and start running. So maybe there's no need for that. It's because these people doesn't know their legal rights. So in New York, this group of graphic designers started collaborating with some lawyers and people who knows about law, and designed this guide for people to know where in the public space they can do commercial activities without being an illegal activity. So with a very easy model like IKEA style, they share with all the vendors the number of square meters you can use without being banned by the police, the distance you need to keep from the shopping windows in certain streets. So if a police comes and tries to tell them, go away from here, they have a tool to say, no, I'm not doing nothing illegal, so I can stay here, and explain the police their legal rights of being there. So this, it's a very simple way of keeping the public space alive and the streets, because everybody, the streets are for the citizens, I think, and of course there are some norms and we need to be respectful, but sometimes if we don't know the norms, we don't know what we can do in our streets. So I think this is a very good and simple example of this kind of knowledge transmission that is very helpful to improve the life in our cities. And this is the last project. This is in Barcelona. And it's a very interesting project because in Barcelona we have also very strict laws about public space. We have beautiful public spaces. At the same time, it's one of the most well-known cities about public space. But at the same time, they are somehow very restrictive. Who can use it? Which kind of furniture you will put there? And in this line, all the public spaces that has been unbuilt or abandoned somehow during the years, it's on the hand of the administration to give response and new uses to that space. So in Barcelona, in my neighborhood, by the way, we have this big space that it was supposed to be to develop educational uses according to the urban plan and the needs of the neighborhood. But what happened? The crisis came, there was no public money, so the space was like that, but at the same time it was closed. They don't have the money to build nothing new there, but they don't allow the citizens and the neighborhoods to come in and develop new projects. So a group of, a very small group of artists from a collective called Densitat and architects from Estradel Tres started having weekly meetings there to try to think how to use that space and to develop workshop. You can see the number of people here and how they started growing a little bit by a little bit. And now there is not only architects and artists. Now we can see a neighborhood here, children there, people trying to give ideas because they live there. You can have the space in front of your house, so you have ideas of how you can use it. And the shift moment of this project that was here when Identidad designed this device, because the citizens were always complaining that they didn't even know how the space looks like, because you can see the wall is super high, so nobody can see that. So the citizens didn't feel that the space was part of the neighborhood. With this device, people can climb up and look to the other side. Here is more clear. You can see in that point that over the door, the green door, people were able to see how the space is. And in this moment, people feel empowered to fight for their space, because if you are able to see and to recognize what is there, you feel the desire to try to do something with that space. So now you can see that the previous group of young persons and artists has been growing up with the neighborhoods. This whole group of persons were doing a paella that day and enjoying. Here the second lady is still with her glass of cava, enjoying while at the same time discussing what they want to do there. So this was the most successful moment, because when all the neighborhoods joined forces, they were able to push the government to open the doors of the space, because the government is used to reject, for example, artistic projects because they say, no, I don't have budget, so stop and don't do that. But if all the citizens and the neighborhood comes, they have the responsibility to give a response. So now the space is open after that, and to link with the original uses of educational purposes, what they do from week to week, it's do workshops, open libraries, and educational activities, while they can wait to have the funds to build a school and an institute. So the space right now looks like that, and they are always doing activities every weekend. And it's very interesting because the people doesn't get tired of coming. All the weekends there is a lot of people there because they feel that they have succeed in having back their space. So now they feel the responsibility of taking care of that space. So I think this is the kind of projects we are going to see later here for the discussion, and I think the concepts behind are very interesting. So I just want to finish saying that, yes, the kind of city we want depends on the kind of person we want to be, as David Harvey says here, because if we want to share, if we want to have new ways of exchange and trade, if we want to avoid, for example, these long queues of people in China doing these so many hours of work, it also affects the way we we buy, we trade, we interact, so it can be a catalyst for change. In the oil crisis in 72 and 73, they have this conclusion that maybe it was a good moment to start thinking and to make a real shift in our cities. So I just want to make the reflection that maybe all these small projects that we'll see during the lectures with people like Ram Labor or Planning for Protest can be these small drop-ins to make a richer city, as some time ago was the island of Nauru. So thank you very much.